brought by the invited speaker will be delivered in 30 minutes and followed by the question and answer session in 10 minutes. And the following presentation will be delivered in 15 minutes and followed by the question and answer session in 5 minutes. After the question and answer session, the session will continue with the next presentation and so on. And before we begin the session, let me introduce you to our invited speaker and presenters. There are 3 speakers in this session. Our invited speaker named Dr. Masitah Shahrill from Universiti Brunei Darussalam, Brunei Darussalam, and Miss Erita from Sanata Dharma University. And there will be Miss Kimberly Mendoza from Philippines, but I think she will be late. So Dr. Masitah Shahrill will have 30 minutes to present and 10 minutes for the question and answer session at the end of the presentation. So without having any ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our speaker, Dr. Masitah Shahrill. Please give it to her.
I don't know whether this clap is much louder. Okay, thank you for joining today's for this presentation today. For me, I'm Dr. Masitah. In Brunei, we don't use the surname. I'm sure it's the same for Indonesia as well, right? If we go to Europe, then I'm referred to as Dr. Shahrill. But in our region, I'm Dr. Masitah. So I'm a senior assistant professor at the Sultan Hasan Al Bolkiah Institute of Education. So that's our faculty at the Universiti Brunei Darussalam. In short, UBD. UBD is quite young. It was established in 1985, and it's the first national university in Brunei. There's only 4 universities in Brunei. So I'm not sure how much you know about Brunei. It's a very small country. Population is less than 500,000.
Rich country.
Yes, oil and sultan. Yeah. So we're just middle class people or working people. Yeah. So I've been in the university for almost started in 2001. So it's close to 20 years. I am specializing in mathematics education. So I brought along my master's students with me from Brunei, the 4 of them at the back. So I've supervised quite a few along my career, and so far, alhamdulillah, 2 of them have graduated from the PhD. So I'm currently supervising 3 more PhD. So for this afternoon's talk, this is the title, Connecting Visual Representations and Action Research in the Teaching and Learning of Mathematics. Welcome. So in regards to classroom action research, how it's defined is it's in regards to systemic inquiry, because it has the aim of informing practice in a particular situation. So this is what classroom action research in general, how it is defined. So it is mainly for instructors or educators because they need to discover what works best within their own classroom or in their own classroom situation, therefore allowing informed decisions about their teaching. So what are the benefits of classroom action research? It does improve the teaching. It can document your own way of teaching. It renews your own excitement in teaching, hopefully, as teachers and educators. So it does provide sort of like a new lens for examining our own teaching. So how classroom action research is different, there is similarities with design-based research. Design-based research, it looks upon the processes Whereas the action research, it does look upon the processes, but it goes beyond into looking at what happens to the students' outcomes, their learning. So that's what action research is all about. So in terms of what I was saying about action research, it happens in successive cycles, one after the other, and what's important is the components of planning. You have to plan before what you want to do for your research, the act of doing the research itself, the fact-finding about the result of the action, meaning that you observe or you collect the data itself, and then you reflect or you review what's happening when you're doing the research, when you implement it in the classroom. And in action research, there's a successive or circular cycle that's happening. It's, or more accurately, the spiral process, because it has become the essential component of defining what action research is all about. There are confusions in regards, especially in the context of education, what action research, because there are many people, researchers out there that uses this term interchangeably. So if you hear teacher research, practitioner inquiry, or practitioner research, it is synonym, ada persamaannya dengan action research. Ya? So with action research, it is a recursive process. If you see in the middle of this of the spiral, you question like, okay, what do you want to do for your research? That's the planning part, and then because of the planning part, and then you may be thinking like, what happens if you do this, you do that? That's the reflecting part, and then you investigate whether it happens or not, the planning and so forth. So it is a process that looks back on itself, and it involves a spiral, adaptable steps. So it does include questioning a particular issue, you reflect upon it, you investigate the issue, and you develop the action plan, and then implement and progressively refine the plan itself. So far, okay? Following it? So again, just to emphasize, action research in its strict sense, it does refer to research activities that uses cyclical action reflection model that investigates and attempt to make changes in an organization. So for example, the organization can be in a whole school. You implement the action research in the whole school, or if you want to go small in terms of your research, just a few classes or even one class, that's fine. As a teacher, or as a teacher in a primary, secondary, or pre-university school, or even in a higher education setting, you can actually do that if you want to see whether what you want to implement works or not. So you use action research. It is also, action research is also collaborative or participative. It's reflective, critical, systemic, cyclical, and focuses on change and strategic improvement of practice. So if the first cycle, you plan it and everything, first cycle doesn't work, because you may see that in terms of the outcomes, the students are learning, or you want to make changes in your lesson plan, for example, then you redesign it and you implement it again in the second cycle, and you see how it works. And if you have time, then go do it again for the third cycle, until there's some concrete evidence saying that your students are actually learning and your teaching is actually improving. So the research method employed in action research is entirely determined by you, by the researcher, given that the primary focus is to improve practice. See, but for this particular talk, I'll focus on more of the methodology, the design, which is targeted for this part of action research only. Right, let me just introduce my faculty. It's Sultan Hasanuddin Bolkiah Institute of Education. It is a graduate faculty in the Universiti Brunei Darussalam. We did start as a Maktab Perguruan or Teacher Education College in 1956. And then we joined the faculty, so it was a huge faculty that offers diploma or national diploma certificate prior to joining the Universiti Brunei Darussalam in 1985. But in 2009, less than a decade ago, we became a graduate school of education. We used to offer Bachelor of Education. We used to offer bachelor degrees, masters and PhD. But ever since we became a graduate school, we only offer masters and PhD. So it is specifically just for graduate programs. These are our focus in the faculty itself. The first is the initial teacher preparation that offers the professional training to graduates who choose to become teachers through the Master of Teaching program. So when a person in Brunei, when they graduate from the bachelor, they want to become teachers, so they can apply for the Master of Teaching. This is a teaching qualification. Before we used to offer the Bachelor of Science Education, Bachelor of Arts Education, but that has been upgraded to a master's level. So we did follow the University of Melbourne in Australia, the Melbourne model. So that's what we're offering at the moment, just Masters of Teaching as the teaching qualification. Secondly is the Graduate Professional Development. That's more focusing on Master of Education by coursework, Master of Education by research, Master in Counseling, and PhD in Education. So these programs are specifically for those who are already certified as teachers, but except for Master in Counseling. So those who are experienced teachers, they can opt to do Master of Education, who have experience in teaching, they can opt to do Master of Education and PhD in Education. Whereas for Master in Counseling, they are those who wishes to become counselors, either in school or hospitals. Not clinical practice, but schools or other ministerial organization. And then continuing professional development, that's more of a professional development courses for practitioners. So we work very closely with the Ministry of Education in Brunei in regards to offering bespoke programs for our teachers in Brunei. And then the school partnership, that's also in collaboration with the Ministry of Education for, especially in regards to our Master of Teaching students, because they do go for 2 semesters of teaching practicum. We call it teaching practicum. No, we don't call it teaching, PPS, Professional Practice and Seminar. Yeah, so it's not specifically just teaching practice. They do go for teaching in schools for experience for 2 semesters, but at the same time, we hold seminars as well, so they can reflect along their practical journey on what they experience in their teaching. So the Master of Teaching, I'll just focus now on the Master of Teaching specifically. This program prepares our teacher candidates with the relevant learning theories, understanding of how to apply these theories in actual classroom, and opportunities to master research skills necessary to improve student outcome. What we're hoping, upon completion of the MTeach program, our MTeach students are expected to be a master of their subject matter pedagogies, because the Master of Teaching do offer several subjects, for example, mathematics, English, science, and so forth. So once they complete their Master of Teaching, hopefully they will become specialists in their subject area. They're also expected to be reflective and innovative. Teachers who generate feedback and design of the 21st century learning, so that their students can have the opportunity to be diverse in their learning needs. They also have to be research-informed teachers and lifelong learners, and also we expect them to be a professional who serves as role model for the students and maintain positive and supportive relationship with the community. So that is what we're hoping for our MTeach graduates. in the MTech program itself, there are 5 areas of specialization. So the early childhood education and care, primary education, secondary education, technical education, and higher education. So the early childhood education and care would focus on, we call it PRA, those 6-year-old students in the primary school, from 6 to about 9 years old. Whereas primary education, it does overlap with early childhood education and care, from 7 to perhaps 12 years old. Secondary education from 12, 13 to 16, 17 years old. And technical vocational education, this will vary in terms of their age range. Education, for example, we are catering now for the polytechnic students. So they are doing the certificate, the diplomas, and so forth. So for the one of the core modules which are focused on the MTech program is the 12th modular credit MTech research exercise. It is 100% coursework. It's assessed by summatively. So there are 5 modules in this research exercise for them, with the aim of it will provide the students with the opportunity to conduct site-based research under supervision. So for example, I'm a supervisor of an MTech teacher candidate. So my teacher candidate will have to go to schools to collect data. So that's the site-based to do their research. It's what we are hoping is that the theories, the research theories, the pedagogical theories that we teach them during their lectures on campus, they will be able to link the research that they learn to the improvement of practice in their actual area of study. So in the module itself, module is a course, we call it module. So they're supposed to they must carry out an actual research study by working independently with a supervisor. They have to investigate systematically questions related to the design of teaching and improvement of learning. They have to demonstrate those in-depth knowledge of the focus of research, for example. And they have to be able to critically analyze the outcomes, their findings, in order to improve the learning outcomes. And at the end, once they are writing up their research exercise, it's just like a mini thesis. So as a summary, they're supposed to do about 12,000 words research exercise. So it is a mini thesis for them. So when they are writing up their research exercise, they have to write it as a research report at a publishable standard. So we don't expect all of them to publish their work, but those which are publishable, which are worthy of being published, then either the teacher candidates themselves or the supervisor will help them present it in terms of the journal, submitting to a journal, or even attending the conference to present it. Alright, so the reason why I'm talking about MTech is, in terms of this presentation, I will be showcasing my MTech students' work. So this is the aim of the present study: investigating alternative teaching strategies implemented by the pre-service teacher candidates enrolled in the graduate program of MTech in my faculty, Shigi, at Universiti Brunei Darussalam. So in terms of the alternative teaching strategies that we looked at are in terms of visual representations. So visual representations, what are the different types of visual representations? There are a lot out there. These are just some of them. Pictorials, in the form of pictorials, drawings, animation, comic storytelling, in the form of images, graphic organizers, visual metaphors, for example. So this is some of the visual representations. Why visual representations? Because according to previous research, it does have the benefit in developing students' interest in learning mathematics. It can assist students to visualize and remember mathematical concepts. They'll be able to visualize the mathematical concepts. It is beneficial for the students' learning process, and it does improve students' mathematics achievements. So these are based on the literature review that are out there. So for the MTeach, so for the present study, these are the 7 students' work that I helped compile in terms of the analysis today. So they looked at the mathematics topic of word problems, that's for year 2, the primary education, order of operations, addition and subtraction of fractions, integers, that's for year 7, the conversion between fraction decimals and percentages for year 9, and year 10, distance times graph and the simultaneous equations. The final row are the number of students in the classroom. So what happens is, just give you a scenario, the teacher candidate will plan what they need to do for their research. Once they've planned it, they've chosen the visual representation, what they want to implement in class. They've also chosen the mathematics topic. They approach the school, the site where they want to collect the data, and the principal or the headmistress or headmaster will say, okay, I'll give you this year level, you can go into this class, then you can conduct your research. So it is quite, I won't say easy access as well, but negotiation does happen. Because it's not easy to convince the principal that I want to take your students for my research. As you all know, right, as a researcher, it's not easy. That's the gatekeeper. So, but the lucky thing is, our teacher candidates, they usually go to the familiar site where they had their teaching practicum. They usually go to 2 different schools in their teaching practicum, so that's when they are already acquainted with the school, with the teachers there, with the students. So that's the advantage for them. So when they want to do their research in the 3rd semester, they'll be able to negotiate their way in. But of course, these are the classes which do not have big exams, meaning that the national exams, we call it O-level for for 16-year-olds. So that's the big exam. Or year 8, you can see there's no year 8. There's another national big exam. So apa tidak dikacau? Yes, yeah, gitu. Yeah. So in terms of their titles, I've highlighted that in red. The visual representation that they chose is the use of comics. Remember this morning, Professor Tok Tim Lam talked about comics? Yes, so the idea came from him actually. Yes, I met him in Eurocom 8 in Taiwan last year when he presented his research from the university, from NUS. And then at the same time, one of my colleagues invited him to Brunei to give a talk as well. So, yes, it's so I'm not sure whether it's whether you guys are volunteered to do this or I was the one who instructed to do it. But I did suggest, I wouldn't say instructed, I suggested that my students do the comics or visual representations, and this is what they've chosen. So it's in different mathematics topics actually. So the central focus of their research questions are investigating the effects of using visual representations of comics on students' performance, and examining their students' perceptions on the implementation of the visual representations or comics as one of the tools in learning the mathematics topic. So to repeat my definition of action research earlier, this is what happened. For cycle 1, they plan it, they design, they need to create the instruments, the when, the what, the where, the why, and the how. They have to think about that. Then they implement the plan in the first cycle. Then they do the data collection or observation. When they collected the results, they review and reflect. And if they have time, then they repeat it. But they refine it, improve on it, and then they repeat it in the second cycle, and so on, in the 3rd cycle. So this is the framework, an example that I've taken from one of the research exercise. This is the framework of what they do. The first one they design, they've chosen a school, then they did a pre-test. Then that's when the intervention happens in the implementation of the comics or visual representation. Then they did the post-test. It's a set of questions. It's just a short test that they do before the actual intervention. That's called the pre-test, and the post-test after. And then they will be given some surveys, or they will be asked to do interviews. And then that's when the analysis happens, the crunching of the brain, to analyze the data that they collected. And then they do the write-up. These are just samples of the visuals used. The comics that one of the teacher candidates did. They did hire a freelance artist as one of the questions during the keynote this morning. How, right? The how. So it is a big job for the students to create their own comics. So what they did was suggested that find some friends who you know as graphic designers or artists, so to hire them to do the comics themselves. But the teacher candidates are actually the one telling them, this is how I want it, you have to put the maths component in it, so that's what's happened. And this is another example. See how beautiful the creations are? Yeah? Distance times graph. So we try to have that Malay component, the wearing the scarf and everything, to put in the comics, so that they'll be more in the context of Brunei. Or in general, the Muslim community. There are also some of the teacher candidates did actually use there are free comics that are available online. For example, this one. No, actually, this is not taken online, right? Is that? Was it online? Oh, I thought you created it.
No.
You yourself is a graphic designer. Just so happens she's a graphic designer. Right? Graphic designer, is that what you call it? Almost, okay. And okay, those are the three samples of comics used. For this one, another teacher candidate specifically just not comics but visual representations in the intervention lessons. So the first lesson is like that, second and third lesson. And I think this is an example of the pre-test and post-test that we use. Just as I said, simple questions that was given to the students. So what happens is before the actual intervention lessons using the comics, they give them, the teachers give this question to the students to see how they do in answering this question. Because some of the topics are actually done along the way from primary to secondary. So they do have that prior knowledge. So we're just extracting what they remember from their previous learning. And the post-test, similar questions, almost similar questions, perhaps just a different format, or not different set of questions being asked. But we do try to maintain the exact not really the exact questions, but the kind of questions that are given in the pre-test, so that they'll be easily compared to. These are some of the survey or interview questions that were asked to the students, and the interview questions as well. So the interview will be audio recorded actually. Summary of findings. In terms of the statistics, the overall mean score of the post-test is higher than the overall mean score of the pre-test, thus showing improvements in the students' results after the intervention lessons. But then, this typically happens anyways. If you do intervention lessons, of course the post-test is going to be higher. But if I remember correctly, you'll be surprised that some did not actually, the post-test was not actually higher. They went down. So something must have happened. In terms of the t-tests, it does indicate that strong evidences of the interventions of using the visual representation. It did have positive impact and significant improvements. In terms of the qualitative reporting, grouped into themes. Okay, the first theme is the students' views on the use of comics. The students do have positive views towards using comics in general. They agreed that using comics made the lessons fun and interesting. From the classroom observation, students gave positive reactions to the use of comics. And then the second overall theme is the impact on the students' learning and engagement. So engagement did happen during the paired discussions. They were actually talking to each other, they were actually debating. So there are social constructs between the students and the teacher during the lesson. And for those students who prefer to use comics during the lesson, they revealed that they were able to remember the concepts of the mathematics better. And thus it helped to improve in their post-test. And then, yes, so the use of teaching mathematics is crucial because it made the studying fun and enjoyable. The third overall theme is on the comics, constructs and emotions. Majority of them do enjoy because of the colors. Remember the distance time graph? Okay, not just that, but other colors embedded as well, right? But it does show that with the use of more colors, it does attract the students for them visually. So it made them more happy, triggering positive emotions. And then some of the students were actually interested in the comic characters as well that were being created. Alright, the final theme, inclusivity for the elementary levels, or the primary levels. So when it was introduced to those year 2 students, it makes sense to them, especially because they are young kids, so they needed to see visually in terms of just learning. In terms of just, sorry, not learning, in terms of just verbally talking to them what maths is all about. And similarly for like what Prof. Top found, although his was also a one case study, he was not able to verify that, confirm that with many students. For this particular research, there are 4 students with learning disabilities. They were not able to, difficulties in reading, and one actually had special needs. So it does help them with the use of comics, it does help them in terms of their learning. So in terms of the use of comics, it helped them in terms of in visually seeing the comics and in comprehending the text as well with the use of the comic strips. The challenges, just to summarize, what the teaching candidates found was, of course, not every research will go smoothly. There were actually absentees in their lesson, and thus they were not able to, in a way, analyze the data constructively. The inadequate availability of the comics to be used in the context of education in Brunei. The challenge of locating artists to hire, difficulties in in-depth research. I've been told, yeah, I'm almost done, so just quickly going through the slides. The other challenge that I need to highlight as well is it is tedious and time-consuming, printing the comics and then passing it to the students themselves. Because in terms of using technology, it doesn't always go smoothly as well because of the technical difficulties in using the laptop, or some of the equipment are not working. So in terms of the conclusion, how I summarize it, it is introducing the use of comics. It is still in the infancy stage, so more research needs to be done. So we do need to consider advantages and disadvantages of using comics in the classroom. And the teachers, hopefully there will be more further exposure in terms of the use of comics in the classroom during the teaching. For action research overall, how it's connected to visual representation, you see it as action research is not about learning why we use certain things, but rather how we can do things better. It is about how we can change our instruction to impact the students. So ultimately, it's the students' learning is what's important. I would like to acknowledge the organizing committee, the chairperson of 7 SEADR, for inviting me as an invited speaker. And these are the students that I would like to acknowledge as well. I thank them for letting me use their findings and presenting it today. And the ones in the green star are the supervisors, including myself. So thank you very much for listening to my presentation today.
For your insightful session, and I believe it will impact us in our teaching later. And now it's time for the question and answer session. I think I will open 3 questions. So let's do this. Are you ready first?
Thank you. My name is Fauzan from Sasmit Padang. Very interesting presentation. Beginning when I hear about action research, I think we in Indonesia have a slightly different perspective about action research, because normally that in action research we implement a learning model or method, then to improve the process in the classroom. And you use the design research is in the term of design research that we do in Indonesia. So what I want to know is that if you improve from one cycle to the next cycles, what kind of improvement that you have done? In design research, we improve our design and student activity in our design. But in your research, what kind of improvement that you make every cycles? Yeah, that's the first question.
Okay.
And the second one, when I saw the last slide about T pair samples, something like that. Yeah. So it seems that you also test the result by comparing.
T-test, yeah.
Yeah, T-test. T-test. Yeah. In my understanding that we use hypothetical testing when you have samples and population. And in my mind that in action research that we don't have population in samples, all become a population. So we investigate the population, not the samples. Can you explain about it? Yeah, why you use the t-test? Yeah.
So the first question was, what kind of improvements done in every cycle? So we actually look at the results of the post-test, the comparison between the pre-test and the post-test. So if there's not much improvement in terms of the standard deviation, perhaps there was something that we need to tweak in the questions that are being asked in the test itself. So it can be a different part of the mathematics topic that being taught. Yeah. But not too much deviation actually from the actual pretest. Just a bit, just a slight change. Whereas for the lesson plan, the lesson design, in general, right? Some kind of improvement in terms of adding on more activities. Just an example that I'm giving you. Adding on a bit of activity after the intervention lesson. Yeah, so you see, it depends on how each of the researcher would find it. Because in action research, it is up to the researcher in how they want to make that improvement. Because it is a trial and error. Yeah, trial and error. Because if the first cycle doesn't work, then that's what I meant, tweaking it. So I cannot pinpoint specifically what kind of improvements. All I can say is in general, in terms of the pre-test, post-test, the lesson plan. So, would you like to hear? Sorry, I'm not to put you under the bus, my students in the back. But do you have anything to say in terms of what you did in your second cycle, there was an improvement? If you can recall top of your head?
In terms of improvement, we did improve our comics.
The comics style, see? Yeah, so
that's why.
comics
Yeah, that's
style.
why if the comics that that's similar with our design research that we
Oh,
did.
yeah. The process.
Not the process of teaching that we
Oh.
improve. So the comics.
Did improve, yeah. Now I remember, even Iza, who was implementing it in the primary school, that was the first cycle, wasn't it, Iza? The one that I showed. And then in your second cycle, when you introduce comic characters which they are familiar with, like Ant-Man from the Marvel comics,
Yes.
they become more interested. And there were improvements, right, after that? So in terms of, they did improve on the comics itself. In terms of the hypothesis testing, they did actually, they did test it, and it was confirmed from the, was it from the t-test or from the t-test, wasn't it? Yeah, they did list out all the hypothesis, what will happen if the comics, I don't remember specifically. Yeah, but there is hypothesis testing as well on top of the t-test. Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
does that answer your question?
Yeah. No, I mean that. In real, not real, actually, that type of exhibition that normally conducted by Indonesian researcher that we don't recognize in design, but in action research, the type of population in some samples. So when you do the hypothesis testing using a statistic test,
Yeah.
so it's mean that you have a population, you have samples, because you test the hypothesis.
That one, we'll explore more in that from the Brunei perspective as well. But yeah, that's interesting to hear. We didn't realize that.
Because after hypothesis testing, we do the generalization. To where that we generalize this result, because we just research one group of.
It's true. That's the limitation, isn't it? Yeah, it's just one group. How can you convince that it does actually work?
Yeah.
Is there any question?
I was wondering about the t-test. My name is Elza from Banda Aceh. I was wondering about the t-test again. I know the t-test is used to explain the main difference between two things. So, in my understanding, you can't really say something influences some things based on t-test. So I was wondering whether you have any plan to do further investigation with the data available, maybe a little bit more advanced quantity to check the influence itself, or maybe correlation.
Well, they actually, when they approach the t-test, they do have the Wilcoxon. That's not my area, so I'm not able to answer that correctly, maybe. But it seems like they did some kind of statistical in order to convince us to go to the t-test. So in terms of the further research into it, I'm not sure actually, because it is a one-off. Once they graduate, unless they do a PhD, then they probably want to further examine the test. Yeah. And I remember even someone, the only male in our entourage from Brunei, he asked whether PhD, does it have to have many samples? Sorry, I have to. See, there's the misconception about PhD. It doesn't necessarily have to be many samples. As long as the data, Because, and I was sharing with him when I was at Melbourne University, one of my colleagues, she only had 3 samples, and that was her thesis. Yeah, thank you very much for those questions.
Okay, I think the time is enough. Okay, thank you, Dr. Masitah Shahrill. And the second thinking skills in class.